in the school. He also serves as a full professor in the School of Visual and Communication Arts. Through his many years in public, private, corporate, and not-for-profit roles, he understands and has been a vigilant supporter of DEI and social justice initiatives. Dr. J, as he prefers to be called, brings over 40 years of experience in leading strategies and solutions to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizational development. Jennifer Scho is the interim Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the College of Our Lady of the Elms. Dr. Scho holds a doctorate in anthropology from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and a Master's of Arts degree in Latin American Studies from San Diego State University. Prior to joining the team at the Elms College, Dr. Scho was an assistant professor in gender and race studies at the University of Alabama, where she taught transnational feminism, Afro-Latinx studies, border studies, and social justice movements to undergraduate and graduate students. Before we start, allow me to share a quick note with you. Please feel free to type any questions that you have into the Q&A field. We'll be monitoring the questions and will answer them at some time and later in the session. So join me in welcoming our panelists today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to join in this very important conversation. One quick side note. Let me send a quick shout out to all of the people from Avila University who have participated in what I'm about to share and as well will offer their insights into today's program. We all had a very quick awakening in May 25th, 2020. Yes, we have heard of diversity initiatives prior to that occasion, but in this sense, on that day, the inequities, the challenges to our organizations became quite paramount. It became our problem. Many of our students took to the streets and shared their concerns. They raised their voices. They let the world know that indeed there were some significant issues that needed to be addressed. That did not go unnoticed. In some instances, it was even rewarded because they had actually set the tone that will lead many of our universities and of course, our organizations in addressing these very important issues. In fact, we did that as well. We memorialized our students' participation in many of the protests and marches by introducing a project called the Doorways to Social Justice, where we took their emblazoned posters from the protest and actually created a work of art that now is shared on many of the doors throughout Avila University. That was not all. Things were not quiet. Even though the organization itself, meaning Avila University, had not introduced an organized approach for diversity, equity, and inclusion, there was an underpinning of concern throughout the organization. And several people whose names are listed here actually were beginning to move from a role of advocacy to one of activist. So it was these 8 people who had been meeting quietly for about a month who then challenged the organization, Avila University, to make some strong moves towards addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. The president, former president, Ron Slepitsa, was actually invited to several sessions and to join the group. He did so quite willingly. I too was invited, probably because I had been at the institution for so very long that possibly I knew some of the institutional knowledge that might be helpful. But this group was the ones who actually began our forage into diversity, equity, and inclusion. Recognizing that the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet had many charisms, we thought it best to build from that very foundation going forward. So we looked at the love of the dear neighbor without distinction and building right relationships as the foundation for our initiatives. We wanted to create and sustain a welcoming environment. Now, welcoming environment means that we allow people to find themselves there and to actually become one with the involvement. We wanted to recruit and nurture a diverse student body. We wanted to hire and retain a diverse faculty and staff. And of course, we wanted to strengthen our community stakeholders. Now, Avila University at the time, in May 2020, had a student body of approximately 52% students of color. We had a faculty of about 78% white, and we had a staff at about 68% white. And we felt that it was necessary that we begin to address that imbalance and bring some equity to that situation. Now, my role was pretty unique because I was not hired to do the job. I volunteered initially, and I was asked to be a strategist, a mentor, a guide, a coach, an advisor to this process that we're going through. We felt it best, since the initiative started at the ground, that it should move forward from the ground. So there were several committees that were created where our employees could voluntarily participate. Of course, we wanted one that addressed the celebrations and observations of our heritage. We wanted to look at our education being curricular, extracurricular, co-curricular, and even community. We wanted to build upon our relationships outside of the university by building allies externally and internally. And very importantly, we wanted to look at our administrative processes to see if and what impact they may have had on our situation. When it all was put together, this began the empowerment and the giving the sense of agency to the employees. But first, we needed to create a strong sense of trust. And that trust had to be built from an institutional perspective, from a personal perspective, and as well, make it believable within the community. We had an overwhelming response. Over 70% of our employees volunteered to participate in this initiative. Their names are listed under the various committees they decided to work with. But we fully understood that the responsibility for DEI rested not just with the employees, but with the board of trustees and as well with our executive team, who had to yield some authority, and that's why that arrow points down, to allow others to express themselves and to become accountable. You can't see this, pay no mind, but those lines of accountability actually connect everything and everybody within this diagram. We also wanted to look at some common pitfalls that others had experienced. You know, DEI had to move past this brainstorming initiative, and we did not want to get locked there. We wanted to look at our key stakeholders for input. We don't like the word training, but we thought education should be customized for all of our participants. And we did not want truly a document that would rest on someone's bookshelf. So progress and objectives that we were looking for had to be tracked and measured. That's not the end. We know our lives change, the world changes, individuals change. And it's like trying to balance oneself upon a rubber ball. Things will get out of kilter. Just like a pendulum that swings from one end to the other, that also creates some challenges for DEI in the workplace. What we found was that we did not want to have what is called prog mess instead of progress. So we looked upon Ella Washington, who wrote for the Harvard Business Review, who gave us some very interesting tactical ways to look at where we were and to measure our progress. Many, many organizations rest in the compliant phase. We have moved a bit beyond compliance and have become tactical, meaning that we have some of our initiatives that have moved beyond just paper and conversation and meetings and are being implemented in pockets of the organization. We are now looking to move towards very integrated, where everything we do within our organization is directed towards a DEI objective. Our objective was to create a culture, not to create a program. DEI comes under many different names, numbers, acronyms. So whatever we call it, we've got to make sure that the language that we use does not actually invite some of the criticism and even become a target for attack that we're experiencing today. We cannot erase the isms. It's time for us to be incessant. We have to be committed to the charge of accomplishing diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice beyond the paper. I look forward to discussing some of the ideas and challenges in our breakout sessions. Thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Dr. J, for your presentation, and thank you, ACSSJ, for inviting me to be a part of the national gathering. It is a great opportunity to share this platform with my colleagues and for the members of the St. Rose community who are joining us for this conversation. Just a few things to let you know who we are. The College of St. Rose is located in the capital city of New York, Albany, and we are an urban campus. We have 4 schools, approximately 3,300 students, 54% undergrads. Our faculty to student ratio is, our student to faculty ratio is 15:1. 99% of our students receive financial aid, 40% identify as Alana. We have 67% that identify as women. We represent 32 states and 61 countries. And we are committed to building our capacity for inclusive excellence. And I will share with you how we arrived at this as our purpose and our theme. We have 5 founding values here at the College of St. Rose, and you can see them on the screen. And our founding values are alive on the campus today, which is over 100 years later. As I share our story, you will hear all of the founding values, yet today we're going to focus on 2 in particular: building an inclusive community and serving the dear neighbor. We have a mission, as do all colleges, and it is vital to how we govern, teach, learn, and live together. There are 2 sentences, however, that I would like to draw your attention to. One is, in the progressive tradition of our founding sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet, we welcome students from all religious and cultural backgrounds. And 2, in addition to developing their intellectual capacities, students have the opportunity to cultivate their creative and spiritual gifts in a diverse learning community that fosters integrity, interdependence, and mutual respect. And I'll draw your attention to those 3 words: integrity, interdependence, and mutual respect. Here at the College of St. Rose, we believe that we have to collaborate to do this work, to build a campus and a community that believes in inclusive excellence. And with these 3 pillars, we have found that it is important that our faculty, our administrators, our students, and our community all agree on these 3 pillars. We operate with integrity, We operate with interdependence. We understand that we all need each other to do this work and to be successful and to create a community of inclusion. And when we do that, we will experience that mutual respect that is beneficial so that our students can learn and lead, our faculty can teach, and our administrators can facilitate a successful operation here at the college. As Dr. J mentioned, many of us had a renewed focus on our efforts as a result of the murder of George Floyd. And when we were called together, particularly by our student development department and our students, we had to decide how we were going to move forward. How were we as a campus going to respond? And we found this framework, the collective trauma recovery framework, and we decided to implement that because we all had experienced trauma. We all had experienced something that shifted and jarred us from what was normal. We were in the midst of a global pandemic, and we were bringing to another level the racial pandemic that was taking place in this country. So there are three pillars in this collective trauma recovery framework. One is active listening, and that is to center and focus on the speaker instead of one's own perspective. This is very, very important when we were listening to our students share their experience, not only in the world, but on the campus. We had to not try to explain away what they were experiencing, but to center them and to hear them clearly so that we can make any necessary adjustments. Having active listening, this improves the mutual understanding without debate or judgment. The second is speaking from the heart. And this is where you communicate honestly and consistently to build trust. It was important that we as an administration were able to communicate honestly and openly with our students to build trust with them so that we could work together to move forward. And the third is acting with, which is to engage with the community to create action plans and resolutions to create a community that operates with our three values: integrity, interdependence, and mutual respect. During this time, our president, Marcia White, led the college as a role model in each one of these pillars. We began to have community conversations. Our community came together, and President White spoke from her heart in sharing how the college was going to move forward. And many of our colleagues from across the campus came together to act with each other to move our campus from the practices, the policies, and the norms that had caused harm to some of our students, to some of our employees. We wanted to have a healing, a recovery. We wanted to move in a place where inclusion was valued, and we acted together to make that happen. It is very important that when this tragedy happened in our country, that all of us came together and we all recognized who we were, and we centered inclusive excellence as a part of that work. What did that mean? What did it mean to be inclusive? What did excellence look like? How could we do that? And each part of our community came together to have that conversation. And it's important that when you see this graph, when you see community, it wasn't just the college community. As I mentioned, we are an urban campus. So our entire community participated in a 21-day equity challenge. And the College of St. Rose was one of the largest participants in that. And that challenge was led by the United Way. And what we found is that partnering with other institutions in our community helped us to continue to move forward in this progression towards inclusion. There was one other model that was really, really important that was introduced during this time, and this was by a sociologist, Bobby Harrell, and this is the cycle of socialization. And we use this so that we could understand our different biases. One of the things that is very important to understand is that everyone has bias and that it's not going away. What we wanted to do is create a community in which you recognized as an individual what your bias is, but then you had the ability not to act on it in a way that caused harm to someone else. So we collaborated together to understand how we have become who we are and how we've come to believe what we believe, and how we can then make a change so that our actions does not impact anyone else in the pursuit of the things that were important to them. During this work, we had to come up with a common language, and I'll share with you some of the definitions that we came up with and that we use to understand diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and social justice. It was important that we all were able to speak that same language, and inclusion, as I mentioned, was our goal, because each one of these is work. Each one of these will cause your campus to grow and develop and really celebrate the diversity that is there. But we understood where we were on our journey, and we believed that inclusion was our goal and our mission for the work that we were doing. And what we wanted to do was create an experience that our community could really embrace everyone and enable them to make meaningful contributions. What are some of the actions that actually came out of our work? We created an IDEA committee, which is Inclusion, Diversity, Equity Action Committee. We wanted to take action. We did not want to be stagnant. We wanted to really move the needle. So we made sure that we put the word action in our title. We had community conversations every week for the spring in the spring semester, and then bi-weekly in the fall semester. And these were conversations that was open to the entire community, including outside of the campus. Our faculty held extraordinary meetings to discuss the information that was shared from our students. Our students were asking for more diversity in the examples that were used to elevate other voices. They were asking for more diverse faculty. So our faculty held meetings to have conversations. As I mentioned, the United Way, we participated in their equity challenge. And then one of our students led a committee of faculty and administrators to create St. Rose's 21-day inclusion challenge. We also held workshops on building our inclusive community, where we explored bias and we really focused on the cycle of socialization. We participated in Lean In's 50 Ways to Fight Bias, which is an online program. We partnered with another college and other community organizations to bring Michelle Alexander here on the College of St. Rose. And then our faculty worked with us to create a semester-long program around her presentation. We started with inclusive faculty search training. We created a bias response team. We held climate surveys. With our Interfaith Sanctuary, we held memorial moments, because it wasn't just what happened to George Floyd. As you know, there were many incidents that have happened since then. So we've partnered to hold moments where we were intentional to holding space. It was very important. President White and I agreed, and our cabinet agreed with us, that we didn't want to be performative. So we didn't just release statements, but whenever we made a statement, we made sure that there was action that came along with that. We restructured our student development department to center inclusion as a part of that. And our Inclusive Excellence Committee has taken on the next level of work that came out of our IDEA committee, which was an ad hoc committee. So for us, collaboration was key to assist the college to heal from the collective trauma that we all experienced. We are still looking at our policies, our practices, and our norms to address systems that have been socialized. We are working together to make our campus one in which our employees and our students can truly contribute in a way that lives out our founding values. Again, I want to thank you, and I look forward to our conversation in our small groups.
Hi there. Thanks for your patience. Hopefully you can see this. I am pleased to be with all of you here today, and especially to join my esteemed colleagues on this panel for what is already becoming a fruitful discussion. Similarly, I'd like to thank my colleagues from Elms College that are on here today. So when I first arrived at Elms College in the fall of 2021, two things held strong in my observations. One was the sense of community and shared purpose that faculty and staff value writ large. And two, the charism of the Sisters of St. Joseph that lay at the core of both that community and collective mission. While this felt familiar to me as a cradle Catholic and as an alumni of a smaller Jesuit university, I also had the added understanding as an academic coming from large Research One flagship state universities in both the Midwest and the Deep South, that if diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work was to be successful, that same sense of community, collective spirit, and shared investment and purpose also had to take hold in the student experience itself, particularly for historically marginalized students, and most especially in the institution's capacity to serve those very students. Elms College is a primarily white institution, especially in its employee makeup. But in last year's incoming freshman class and this coming year's expected enrollment, nearly half the student body are BIPOC, the largest group self-identifying as Black, Latinx, or Afro-Latinx. With these changing demographics over time, I would argue, as my colleagues have alluded to, that it is everybody's responsibility at our colleges and universities to do the work of DEIJ. How then, though, do we create that shared investment and buy-in, create that sense of trust, not only for building individual competency, but also institutional capacity? The student climate surveys that we undertook in both academic year 2022 and 2023 suggest that a majority actually of Elms students express that they feel valued as an individual at Elms. However, response rates to questions about belonging and experiences of discrimination reveal that additional work is required to bolster a greater sense of representation, access, safety, inclusion across a diverse student population. Taking seriously this feedback, we, the senior administration, set a number of strategic priorities this past year around DEIJ, which then provided a framework for the work of the President's Institutional Diversity Committee, founded in 2018, and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. The first priority, which I wanted to focus on, was that we were to implement faculty and staff professional development opportunities using an intersectional approach to bolster understandings of race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, and disability. Second, after speaking of what makes the Elms College experience distinct for our students, the distinctiveness of the Elms Catholic mission, we wanted to develop at least 2 new student programming initiatives that cultivated students' awareness of the Elms core values and their link to a commitment to DEIJ. So I came to understand that using the aforementioned sense of community and shared purpose and commitment to the college's mission could offer a powerful and meaningful point of entry for the educational and professional development program and initiatives coming out of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. While there existed a previous training model, I grew suspicious that such one and done activities could not adequately propel nor sustain the work of equity and inclusion over time. Equally, as an educator, I was inspired by a different vision, one that might harness this creative collaboration at Elms, while also infusing a sense of mutual responsibility among all of our constituents to move equity and inclusion forward in service to our students. Whoops. This isn't. Inspired by Dr. Eddie Moore's 21-day challenge, I worked with the Curriculum and Development Subcommittee of the Institutional Diversity Committee at ELMS to curate a 21-day challenge specifically for ELMS faculty and staff to enhance a deeper understanding of topics central to racial justice. A series of selected articles, short videos, and our podcasts were provided to each participant in a weekly sequence around the themes of the historical context of race and racism, whiteness and privilege, and steps as we move forward, which included conversations that discussed intersectionality, as well as attempted to demystify catchphrases that have become, in a sense, deemed hostile, such as critical race theory. Participants were asked to engage with the material individually and then partner with a colleague over that week to reflect together about any thoughts, ideas, feelings, and areas of growth that emerged from the learning process. Finally, at the conclusion of each week, the cohort as a whole met over a shared meal for a guided large group discussion before moving on to the next week's theme. This approach to collaborative learning seemed to break down many of the barriers that had been expressed to me prior to this experience by some faculty and staff. While most of the folks who chose to participate already felt called toward forwarding DEIJ work, many still felt a level of discomfort or lack of confidence in engaging in larger conversations with their colleagues about not only their individual competency, particularly with anti-racism education, but also in moving the institution's capacity forward in their own respective units and divisions. Sharing in this experience with one another provided the opportunity for faculty and staff to not only learn about one another's situated perspectives and experiences, but also to reflect upon and verbalize that discomfort, discern the obstacles and challenges to their growth, and demystify some of the language rampant in society used to render DEIJ work marginal or worse, invisible. 96% of the participants who was surveyed either agreed or strongly agreed with the following: that the experience deepened their understanding of race and racism. The experience provided insight to help them be a better advocate for racial justice at ELMS, and they took something from the workshops that will help them be a part of building a more inclusive campus community. With the second strategic priority in mind, the one of reinforcing the distinctiveness of the ELMS Catholic mission through the development of new student programming that cultivates student awareness of the ELMS core values and a commitment to DEIJ, I was inspired by that same structure of the 21-day challenge for racial justice curated for faculty and staff, and decided to use it to design a new student-centered experience. If, as many historically marginalized students within the spaces of their affinity group, student organizations, within the space of my office, or within these climate surveys, say that they don't feel like the classroom particularly is necessarily a place that they feel seen, heard, valued, or understood, either by their peers or their professors and or with the curriculum itself, it is the institution's prerogative then to create alternative spaces and places in which to nurture a more holistic educational experience. With this in mind, I created the ELMS for Equity Student Challenge. This time it was a month-long experience held during Black History Month, and each week of materials were curated around one of the four core values of the ELMS College: faith, community, excellence, and justice. Similar to the 21-day challenge, students who joined the challenge worked through the material with partners, came together each week as a cohort over lunch for a guided large group discussion. I decided for this presentation today to share a little bit of that journey, to kind of give you a microcosm of one of the initiatives that we're creating here to kind of build that culture that's really centered on our BIPOC students and LGBTQ plus students, but also are inclusive of all students who are interested in learning and developing, exercising that muscle that, again, merges what we know to be ELMS College's core values with the DEIJ work. So for the first value of excellence, we start off simply. Students were asked to view the documentary Freedom Riders. The focus was on a group of college students just like them who came together from different regions and states, each with a different life story and position in society, each situated differently in relationship to the rampant racism that engulfed the Jim Crow South, to unite around a deeply shared conviction to fight social injustice. Students were able to reflect together on those social issues that were most important to them while trying to imagine what it would feel like to be so passionate about an issue as to leave school before finals in order to travel across a region, building alliances with folks from all walks of life at great personal risk. This collective reflection around social justice helped them to see clearly how the charism of the Sisters of St. Joseph that undergirds ELM's mission is both relevant to their lived experience and almost demands the kind of excellence that participants are already striving for through their higher education, through their own histories and observing and being part and parcel of families that actually were the foot soldiers of the civil rights movement, but also as they themselves and their own peers who have, as Dr. J says, taken to the streets in very real and figurative ways. So that was a great start to the conversation. Then in the next week, we moved to the value of community. And this week, students were invited to learn about and from the Combahee River Collective, a group of Black women, primarily Black queer women, who came together in the late 1970s in recognition that the dominant second wave feminist movement was not speaking to nor addressing their own particular struggles, desires, and needs, nor those of their respective communities, both in the US and across the African diaspora. The model for their own organizing principles was a collaborative one that centered deep sharing, communication, and discernment as the foundation for collective action and, better yet, activism. Students were then able to draw parallels to a more contemporary activist movement, also founded by queer Black women, Black Lives Matter. They then came together to discuss the core value of community with invited faculty and staff that they identified as their mentors in a similarly structured conversation style as that of the Combahee River Collective, particularly around the question of what it feels like to belong and not belong, as well as why the value of community was so central to not only these movements, but also to the Sisters of St. Joseph, and thus the charism of the college. Week 3 strategically intersected with our annual Black Experience Summit. This year's summit theme was actually embodying faith, seeking racial justice. So I situated the theme of faith, where students came together to reflect on their own faith practices and showing up as their authentic selves prior to learning directly from the guest speakers and panelists of this year's Black Experience Summit, co-sponsored by the Congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Springfield. The year's theme seamlessly intersected with the students' journey as the summit explored the obstacles and challenges facing religious institutions and faith leaders in realizing racial justice both historically and in the present. Finally, in week 4, students reflected on the core value of justice through the lens of Ida B. Wells and Nicole Hannah-Jones, two female journalists, situated in 2 very different time periods, but both struggling to use the power of the pen to write truth into US democracy, often at great risk to their own lives and livelihoods, and both at a time when dominant white supremacist backlash attempted to render the history of US racial violence marginal and invisible. So by the end of these 4 weeks, 100% of the student participants surveyed either agreed or strongly agreed to that the weekly learning materials and partner discussions deepen their understanding of equity from an intersectional perspective, from both race, gender, and sexual orientation. That the Elms for Equity Challenge increased their understanding of Elms core values and the distinctiveness of the mission of Elms College. The challenge helped them to understand how Elms core values intersect with principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. Most importantly, students understood better that they were not somehow outside of the institution. that they actually shared the same values as the college, that they were actually the values that the college was aspiring to. And so in fact, while many of the students, particularly BIPOC and LGBTQ plus students, recognize those values as somewhat aspirational at the institutional level, they felt a deeper level of investment in their important role in shaping those values now and in the future of shaping that institution. So for me, both of these initiatives strengthen my resolve that a collaborative approach is gold at an institution like Elms College. This understanding, alongside some creative thinking on how to refresh and reinvigorate the way we think through educational and professional development initiatives for different campus constituents, can help to ensure that equity, inclusion, and justice work is infused more meaningfully and sustainably within the college's mission, rooted in the long legacies of the charism of the Sisters of St. Joseph. Thank you so much.
Thank you to our presenters for their insightful presentation and to the audience for your participation. As we move to the next phase of our program, you will have the opportunity to discuss the 3 strategies that were presented: consultation, collaboration, and facilitation, and how they currently show up either on your campus or how they can show up on your campus. We shared these strategies so that you can create a strategy to benefit your students and employees and to fulfill your mission. So in your small groups, please work toward the goal of sharing your discussion in a 2-minute readout. So now I'll turn it over to, I guess, Martha to break us out into groups. Each one of the facilitators will be in one of the breakout groups. But we're going to leave it to you to lead the discussion. We're just there as a guide.
I see Dr. J, I see Yolanda, I see Jennifer. So all the groups should be coming back now. So I know we're kind of running up against time. So Jennifer, you're scheduled to go first. Does someone from your group want to share with us some of the discussions that you all had in your breakout session briefly?
We didn't really nominate anyone, and I'm not sure if Tanya would be comfortable, I think. But if not, I can do it as well. It's up to you.
Totally your call. I don't mind.
Please do. I think people would love to hear from you.
Well, hello, Dr. J. I really, of course, I gave major kudos to Dr. J for all that he's done to help us, build out everything at Avila. I don't know that I mentioned this, but Avila is actually my alma mater too, 15 years out. So things have changed drastically. But what we talked about in our group was really just how we bridge the gap, how we use the collaboration to help people draw into the mission. Jennifer spoke about how we use the view of our sisters, our founding sisters, to really help shape where we're going with this and understand that it's not an easy task, but we can use it to strategically help us get to where we're going.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Yolanda, someone from your group, do you all want to join the conversation?
Sure, I'll be happy to jump in here. Our conversation really centered on the idea of centering the voices of those who have experienced marginalization and how doing that work can help you highlight the areas where your campus needs to do some work. We had some really excellent examples of collaborative efforts when multiple campuses can come together to work. We had a discussion of the question of digital accessibility and how shifting and thinking about digital accessibility and as an equity question for everyone, right? That distance education and access is important, and that by providing opportunities to address that, you are actually helping the entire campus. And so we talked through some strategies like that at thinking about the whole person and thinking about the whole campus, but also doing the work of centering and listening to those who have experienced marginalization directly. And also the value of connecting beyond campus. We had a great example of taking the alumni networks and also having them have a part in something like affinity groups that you might form on campus.
Thank you. Thank you. Someone from Dr. J's group.
They're quiet? Okay, I'll take it. Right. Pretty much the group had a very good discussion. One of the primary points was we got to recognize in this work that you're never alone. Sometimes you don't know who your companions may be. They may not be at the institution, they may be elsewhere, but you've got to reach out sometimes to identify them. There's also a need to empower individuals. So there's no solo acts in this business, and to build relationships on trust. Another issue that was discussed was burnout. Because of the intensity of this work, we need to organizationally pay attention to burnout and turnover and assure that we have a means to carry on the good work of others into the future.
Thank you. And Christine, do you want to chime in from our session?
Sure, I can start us off, and anybody who wants to join in, please feel free to follow. But we began a discussion just talking a little bit about our roles on the campus as we're meeting each other and how we're involved in this work in our sort of our day-to-day and our responsibilities as managers, and also in the scope of sort of our discipline. I started talking. I oversee enrollment and financial aid, so our dedication to access and recruiting diverse populations of students into connecting them to the opportunities at the institution. Additionally, as a group, I think we felt that we were fortunate to have the mission and the charism of the Sisters of St. Joseph to help us in this work in terms of inclusivity being really at the heart of the mission and the core values. And someone commented really just across our institutions, the core values have such similarities. You see that coming through in our values, in who we are. I even had commented we're in the midst of beginning our strategic plan and the place in which our mission, charisms, and focus on diversity and equity and inclusion is so purposeful in our development of our strategic plan. So it really goes hand in hand with our mission and really who we are as an institution and what our history is. So I felt really fortunate there in that respect. I will let others chime in too. That's a little bit also from the recruitment and enrollment lens, but I had some colleagues in the group who are from working with other divisions at their university. So I'll pass it off to others.
No? Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Sounds like we had some great and productive conversations in our individual breakout sessions. There was one question posed earlier. It says, these are wonderful presentations. Would you be open to sharing them with us? So Brandy, thanks for asking that question. My understanding is that after the sessions, everything will be posted online. The recordings of the conversation will be posted online. And there may be an opportunity to get the PowerPoints as well, along with the contact information for our facilitators today. So what we're going to do as we start wrapping up our time is we're going to go around to our facilitators and let them give you some closing thoughts as we think about, where do we go from here? So Dr. Schilf, I want to start with you.
Thank you. Again, this was a really great conversation. And I think something that we touched upon a little bit in our small group was we all share this charism of the Sisters of St. Joseph. It imbues our mission and imbues our values, but you can see how it manifests in different ways, and how this work takes on different qualities, depending again on where we're located, the climate of the times, the size of the university, how far back this work has gone at the university, right? So just hearing all three of our presentations, you can understand, for example, sort of the different layers as well as the different starting places that we are at. And so I think that holistic understanding of knowing that, yes, you have to start somewhere, and it has to become part of that strategic planning of the larger institution. And so that collaboration, that understanding, like, for example, I was talking about Elms College, and a lot of times you hear that sense of community that I spoke about. Well, that's because many of our offices are offices of one. And so when you think about where the work, was being done prior to my arrival, I had to get to know that, right? And I don't know that we all understand the work that others are doing, even at a small college. So making those connections, bringing it out to really think about how we want to create a shared investment, a shared purpose in a strategic long-term vision that, again, yes, centers our historically marginalized students, always centers those voices, and really builds upon the legacies of the Sisters of St. Joseph to a new and better future, which goes right into our theme. So I've really appreciated my conversations with Yolanda and Dr. J and the other folks on our group. I'm learning so much from them. The context of us actually coming together and deciding what this panel would be on is precisely because we took different approaches and we heard that in each other. And it's been I just want to give a shout out to both of them. I really, and Dr. Steve too, just think about how coming together and building those networks outside of the college, especially in the midst of the ACSSJ colleges. Thank you, Martha. It has been a true gift. So thank you.
So I'd just like to say one of the things that I'm taking away from this conversation, and I hope that each and every one of you will take away from this conversation, is the ability to be expansive in your thought. Really think about the whole person. Think about one of the things we talked about in our group is how sometimes we show up in our privileged identity the most. But if we look at our full identities, all of our identities, there are parts of us that are marginalized. And what if we took this the perspective of how do I make that identity that is marginalized, that I hide, that I don't share? What if I did the work to make that identity prevalent and seen? What would diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and social justice look like on my campus? That is what being inclusive means. Thank you. And I love working with my team. It is amazing to be a part of this team.
Thank you, Dr. J.
I'm here. Well, we talked earlier about universities going through transitions, and I mentioned that we have a new president. We also have a new focus because Avila University is Kansas City's private university of access. And along with that comes a brand new strategic plan that we've all been engaged in preparing. Wow, I'm so proud to say that our DEI initiative is at the very foundation of the word access and as well, each of the components of that strategic plan. But I also want to mention that I have enjoyed working with the panelists, learning from Martha, and I'm open to any other input that any of our guests have today. Hopefully you'll have our email, you can share your ideas, because I believe this: great artists borrow, or is it good artists borrow, great artists steal? So I can expect to see our DEI program in Kansas City having a collaborative aspect and as well a facilitation aspect as we move forward. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I love that. What I'll share with everyone is this. I think oftentimes when we think about the work specifically around diversity, equity, and inclusion, it can seem overwhelming. And I ask that everyone take a moment to just breathe, because many times you'll see that there's an office of one, possibly two people, but it's really everyone's work. And the more that we collaborate, the more that we break down the silos that we're in, the better it's going to be that we move towards getting us to where we need to be. Yolanda pointed out something that I think is very important, that we all walk in a level of privilege, and understanding that privilege gives us the opportunity to empower ourselves to walk in a minority aspect as well. And when you think from that minority perspective, you can think from a perspective of how do you feel being the minority or the marginalized individual. That should help us move the needle on diversity, equity, inclusion, and create that belongingness. The work that we're doing is so pivotal and so important that we can't stop. You can't let the naysayers or the pushback, be deterrents. You have a team of individuals, look around the call, a team of individuals around you here supporting you. So feel encouraged by what you see on this call today, that others are here doing the work that you're doing, but more importantly, that you have advocates, allies, and people to borrow and or steal from as well. Feel free to reach out. I thank you all for your engaged participation. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Martha, who's going to give us some closing thoughts and feedback.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kenny, Dr. J, Yolanda, Dr. Show. We are so glad that you are with us today, and you have given us much to think about. This has been a rich and important conversation. I'm so grateful that you've shared your knowledge with us. And it is a conversation. It is conversations like these that I think allow us to grow individually as well as institutionally. And I want to just amplify that DEI work is shared work, and it aligns so much with the charism of the Sisters of St. Joseph. So thank you for providing this rich conversation. I'm going to transition us now into the next session. I invite you to stay into the next session. One of the most important aspects of the conference is to give opportunities for colleagues to connect with each other. We did a little bit of this in the breakout rooms, but we'll have more time in the next 45 minutes for you to connect with your colleagues. So I know many of us have been on Zoom for the last hour and 45 minutes or so. Or maybe not that long, but a long time, enough for us to all get a well-deserved bio break. So I'm going to invite you to take a break, turn off your cameras, and come back with us in about, let's give it 3 minutes, okay? So we'll invite you to come back in about 3 minutes and take that quick stretch break, And thank you again for our panelists who have provided us lots to think about today.